they should be resolved now. There are a number of housekeeping rules. Firstly, if you have a mobile, please switch it off. Secondly, the no fire alarms plans, or if it goes off, it's a real thing, sadly. Go down the ramp and reassemble by the piazza near actually the cathedral. Thirdly, if you need to use the toilets, they're either side of the public entrance. And finally, while we're seated, people can take off their masks, but if you're moving through communal areas, please can you put them on? I have a number of points and notes from members. Firstly, I'm pleased to say this meeting's being webcast again, and generally that should be the case for DC meetings, so long as our meetings are on Wednesdays. Secondly, since last month, the officers are forwarding to your devices a copy of the visual presentation, so you should see that on your device rather than see it up there on the screen. Thirdly, more of a personal point. I must say, this municipal year, I've taken almost a parental pride in the fact that, in my view, this DC committee is particularly businesslike, and I have felt whilst members have addressed all the salient points, they've been matter of fact and to the point, for which I thank you. It won't have passed your attention. We only have one item on the agenda this evening, but I don't think that should be taken as a reason for allowing verbal diarrhea to infect people. So I would urge you to actually be as concise and to the point as usual. Otherwise, the chairman will be very intolerant, of course. Secondly, apologies for absence. No members are absent. Gary Collins has sent his apologies, and we have Jonathan Diamond instead, so welcome, Jonathan. Thirdly, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations, Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the planning application is in my ward, and West, but I retain an open mind. Thank you.
That's fine. Fourthly, we have the minutes of the last meeting.
Chair.
Yeah?
It's not in my ward, but I live in the ward. But I have an open mind.
Can we note that, Jeremy?
Unusually for me.
Well, while we're at it, it's directly opposite, just across the street from my ward, although not close to where I live.
And it's about 4 miles away from where I live too, but I won't declare an interest.
What we're all frantically doing is trying to extract what little fun we may under this new stern regime.
Understandable, Councillor Pearce. Fourthly, minutes of the last meeting. Can I have a mover there to enact it? Councillor Hansfax, seconder. Thank you, Philippa. 5, action sheet. This is a new innovation we brought in last month, so we can actually see transparently any matters arising from the minutes. As you will see, there are 2. Hopefully, they're fairly straightforward. Gary Collins emailed you with an explanation about number 1, about plot 3, Bedminster Green. I understand it was factual. I have to say, personally, I'm rather disappointed about the administration's comments. I would hope all of us would actually want to consider an RP said only where there was strong local support. No one has an interest on forcing it on local people. But we did urge to fast track this before the developer had an impact on people in Windmill Hill. Councillor Plowden, you were very tenacious about this at committee. Do you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do. The response to this committee's request to expedite a much-needed RPZ is very disappointing. The Mayor's RPZ policy amounts to willfully ignoring the wishes of local residents, as even surveys at the public expense which demonstrate overwhelming support have been disregarded. Even when developers are stumping up very large sums of money, approximately £750,000 specifically for on-street parking controls, he continues to refuse to listen. So we have a half-cocked parking strategy, which is a recipe for parking chaos. We have multiple new low parking developments in an area already suffering from parking problems. Even the developers have paid up in recognition of the need to do something. Thinking that low-traffic neighbourhoods in isolation will solve this problem is fanciful thinking, even if they materialise. In fact, failing to plan for the large amount of commuters that will continue to seek to park in Windmill Hill will worsen parking chaos and could undermine the success of any LTN that might come forward.
I think it's unfortunate we only have a written report, so can I suggest actually I'll take it up with Gary Collins, and certainly we'll have a verbal report next month.
Thank you, Chair.
So can we move on to item 6, appeals? Can I pass over to Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the details of appeals that have been lodged and the appeal decisions that we've received is set out in the report under agenda item 6. Having reviewed this, there doesn't appear to be anything particularly of note to update you on this time, but I'd be happy to answer any questions on any of the appeals that are listed.
Are there any queries? It appears not. Can we move on to enforcement 7?
Yes, members will note that one enforcement notice has been served, issued on the 6th of October, and the details of this notice are included in the report before you.
Tom.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had a question about enforcement, because I know we've got several cases outstanding in my ward which have been outstanding for months now, and I know I'm not the only one, so it surprises me to only see one listed on the agenda. Last time, at the last meeting, Gary spoke about having an enforcement briefing for councillors, and I just wondered if you are aware if there's any plans to move forward with that.
In the agenda papers under the section, but as I say, we'll certainly take that away and discuss that.
Are you happy with that, Tom?
Yeah, if you can report back and let us know what the outcome was, that'd be great. Thank you.
I would imagine, actually, Jeremy, if we could list that as a matter arising.
Yes, I was going to say, so just apologies to the meeting. My mic doesn't work, so I have to just speak to you like this. Yeah, that item and the request from Ed Plowden are items that I would include in the action sheet, so that it will be picked up automatically in the next meeting.
Super. Can we move to item 8, public forum, please? Just to let the public know, normally we do this just in advance of the item, but in this case, actually, there's only one item, Bath Road here, so literally that will be in about a minute. When I call your names, could you please just come to the central mic? The mic's already on, so you don't need to fiddle with it. And just summarise your point. Now, members of this committee had a full copy of your statements yesterday, and they've read it. So if you could just summarise the key points in about 1 minute, please. So the first person I've got is Penny Morgan. Penny?
Thank you, Chair and Committee. So the point I'd just like to make is that although we welcome there being some development in this site, we recognise the need for more housing. The concern is the density and the issues it will raise on the local communities and the future communities that will live in development, and how it will cause stress with some of the issues that will cause. Particularly my suggestion or concern is that with limited parking in an area that's already been affected, that we have no means for future plans and solutions to be made if all the car parking spaces are sold, and we're just seeing the result of repeated applications for more dense buildings on the site. Okay.
That's fine, Peggy. Before you leave, can I just ask, you use the term we ask, are you representing any group, or are you just, I don't mean just, a local neighbour?
So technically, I probably also represent the Association of Arnesvale residents that were formed to form part of the RPZ that was put in for Edward and Chatsworth Road. I'm also Secretary of Greater Brisbane Together and involved in public consultation meetings in the area.
That's fine, thanks.
Thank you.
I've got Ashley Nicholson.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. First of all, just say who I am, and that actually I'm the guy who's been doing paintworks for the last 20 years, so it is my baby. So anyway, I wanted to say, first of all, BCC members and officers have considered paintworks to be an exemplar in its design and mixed-use sustainability credentials. So we're disappointed this abutting site is being recommended for approval without the same level of scrutiny that we've had at paintworks. It will be perceived as being part of paintworks, and as such, we're concerned and protective of what we've built over the last 20 years. There are three main issues that we feel it falls short. The first is lack of commercial. Paintworks' new build elements include affordable and 23% commercial. As developers, we understand the idiosyncrasies of viability reports and the difference between viability land values and market land values. In our opinion, the issue here is the land price is simply too high, and that is what's driving the employment space and the deficiencies of the scheme. There is little benefit in housing if there's no places for people to work, and mixed use is truly sustainable because it prevents people commuting. There is a demand, as we have a waiting list for commercial space at paintworks. On viability, the officer's report highlights the suspect cost assumptions. The valuation comparables conveniently don't include paintworks, and indeed references refer to other lower value sites. In our opinion, the viability could and should support affordable provision, compliant affordable provision, and meaningful mixed use. As for design, whilst there have been improvements, which is appreciated, we are still concerned that these lesser quality buildings block the better quality buildings of paintworks behind.
Can I thank you, Ashley? Okay. That's splendid. Thank you.
Thank you.
Charlotte Taylor-Drake.
Hi members, I'm the planning consultant on this project. This site is an allocated brownfield site that will provide housing in a highly sustainable location. Through the last 2 years, we have worked closely with officers and made amendments, including reduction in scale and massing of the building and the introduction of a bus lay-by along the site frontage. The site will provide 109 new homes, of which 50% will be affordable through a combination of Section 106 and grant funding. As stated on the amendment sheet, the Council's advisors have concluded that when using Vistry's build cost information, the offer of 15% affordable housing within the Section 106 agreement is reasonable. The proposal will retain mature trees along the site boundary, and the landscape will include for food growing and an area for play for children. The proposal includes 208 cycle parking spaces, and there will also be a car club and electric vehicle charging points. The development will deliver the highest proportion of affordable housing of any phase within the paintworks allocation. The proposal complies with policies in the local plan, and I encourage members to agree with the officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
And Ronnie Poppett, please.
Thank you. I'm Rainey Poppett. I'm the Development Director at Vistry Partnerships. I'm really proud to be able to present our third scheme in Bristol this year, following Blackberry Hill City Gateway and Romney House that we're delivering in partnership with Gorham Homes. This site at Bath Road could contribute to a programme of 968 homes, of which 44% will be affordable, and it's underpinned by an investment of £178 million into the city. We propose to regenerate the Bath Road scheme, which is a derelict brownfield site, into 109 high-quality homes, helping to tackle Bristol's housing crisis. Our expert report confirms that 15% is viable. However, we are going to go well beyond this and deliver 50% in partnership with Abri. A recent review of our build costs at Romney House, which was instructed by Gorham Homes, confirmed that when benchmarked against 4 other projects, it offers very good value for money. So we are confident that we're robust in this matter. Also, our design enables connecting into the Bristol heat network, playing our part in tackling the climate emergency. Committee, we will be ready to start on site in the spring should planning permission be granted. Thank you.
Can I thank members of the public for their statements? Can we now move to discussion of the case in point Bath Road? Susanna, could you introduce us, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? So this is the description of development on the screen now. As with a brownfield site, located for housing in the current local plan, and this is an aerial image of the site here. Just to point out a policy kind of headline, as you probably know, Bristol House in January this year showed that the LPA is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing supply, which it's required to do, and it can only demonstrate a 3.7-year land supply. So as a result of this shortfall, national policy requires decisions to apply a presumption in favour of housing development unless there are clear policy reasons to refuse it. So as you can see here, it borders onto, it's got Arnesvale Cemetery to the south of the site. Bath Road runs along the south of the site too. And it should be noted at this point that all other 3 boundaries of the site are in private ownership. And as is discussed in the report, the design has undergone quite a lot of changes during the course of the application, and officers have been discussing this with the applicant throughout, and I've just put 2 images showing how it was originally submitted and what's before us now in the revised scheme. It came in at 7 stories on Bath Road, and then in the revised scheme it shows 6 stories on Bath Road with a reduction in the massing as well in the centre of the elevation, which allows more sunlight into the courtyard beyond. This is the elevation facing paintworks to the north of the site. Again, the lower image shows the current scheme, and as you can see, it's not that visible, but where my cursor is now is where the elevation ends, and then the axonometric drawing goes up the hill towards Bath Road. And this elevation has been reduced in scale from 6 stories to 4 stories now, and officers are now happy with the articulation that's been presented more recently. Just a couple of images of the side elevations. This is the one facing Majestic Wines. You can appreciate from this image the slope that runs down from Bath Road to the north of the site. And just on the corner here, on the side that's opposite Paintworks, is where the commercial unit is proposed, which is discussed in the report, but I'll come on to shortly. This is the other side facing the Art Deco building. Which, you can see some of the flats would be accessed from this side. There's quite a lot to say about this drawing. I'll start at the very bottom of the scheme. This is the basement car park. It shows where the cycle parking is located within the scheme. So it's kind of dotted around in the basement. There's also the heat network connection plant room. There's a storage for bulky items for the residents, such as pushchairs. And it's also demonstrated on this slide that refuse and delivery service vehicles can enter the site via the existing vehicular access off Bath Road and can turn within the site and exit the site in a forward gear. The number of car parking spaces is seen to be acceptable as it's in line with the enterprise zone parking standards. And yeah, you can see on this slide as well where the commercial use is proposed. This is actually at ground floor level on this northern part of the site, with the southern part of the site in the basement here. And again, the land use, acceptability of the land use is discussed in the report against the backdrop of the housing delivery test and presumption in favour of housing development. This slide just shows the proposed lay-by that was negotiated during the course of the application, and it's to alleviate the potential for congestion along Bath Road, which is a safeguarded transport route in the local plan. It's envisaged to become a lot more frequently used with mass transit, so therefore officers considered this double lay-by, which would accommodate 2 buses, was necessary to prevent queuing on Bath Road. So that's now seen as an acceptable layout. Just quickly to show, this is what Bath Road at this point looks like. It's quite narrow. You've got Arnessvale Cemetery creeping in on the southern side, and this is where the lay-by would be introduced here. This is the ground floor layout, just looking at the quality of accommodation that would be provided. The main entrance would be from Bath Road, and people would either go into the cores of the development or directly into their flats. I've just pulled out some of the main items that would be within the courtyard, because it's acknowledged that it would be in shade for some of the time. So the sunniest part of the courtyard is being given over to planting, and it's considered that the proposed layout of the landscaping responded quite well to the site constraints. Just finally to show that where the bus stop is proposed, there's been a generous allocation of public open space in front of the development, which gives the residential units on the ground floor some defensible space to the front, and there's a landscaping scheme that's being secured as well. The daylight levels to the flats are considered to be acceptable, with some daylight, sunlight and daylight levels to neighbouring properties also seem to be acceptable. There's a good standard of accommodation with private amenity terraces and balconies as well as the courtyard. Just quickly moving on, I've just introduced the affordable housing issue. We've got Jim Cliff here to answer any questions, but the policy requirement in this area is for 30% to be provided by the developer on site, and not via a grant. So in this case, the applicant's viability assessment has sought to demonstrate that development can only afford 15%, where, therefore this is only half of the amount required by policy. Whilst the grant would bring this figure up, it's not able to be guaranteed through the planning process. So that's the kind of headline on the affordable housing issue there. And just finally, officers are seeking delegated authority to just finalise the wording of the pre-commencement conditions that are on the agenda with the applicant. But on balance, it's not on balance. We're recommending approval subject to the Section 106 and conditions.
Thank you, Susanna. We'll now move to questions. I'm aware you slightly exceeded your 5 minutes, but I must be getting dangerously liberal. Since we only had one item, I didn't hold you to account. Can I just push off with the first one, which relates to the affordable housing, and perhaps Jim can actually answer this. I believe I understand the difference between the 15% funded as part of the Section 106 and the fact that the applicants say they can actually bring it up to 50% by a grant from Homes England. But could you actually respond more fully so we members are very clear about this fact?
Oh, there we go, it is on. So the council's local plan policy is that development in this part of the city should provide up to 30% affordable housing at no cost to the public purse. And anything that we secure through a Section 106 agreement is affordable housing that is at no cost to the public purse. So it's provided by the developer without any sort of grant from Homes England or a relevant housing association. There is no earthly reason at all, or no reason why a developer cannot provide additional affordable housing using grant, but it's not something that we deal with through our planning policies. So where a developer enters into an agreement with a housing association to provide more than 30% affordable housing, or more than whatever can be provided through a Section 106 agreement, what will in essence be happening there is the housing association will be buying the units from the developer at maybe not quite open market price, but not far off, so something like maybe around 85 to 90% of open market value. Whereas the Section 106 units, they'll only be paying about 50 to 55% of open market value. The developer benefits from doing these deals with housing associations because housing associations will generally pay and buy a load of units and pay up front, so it really benefits the developer's cash flow. But those units are all being funded using grant, and grant is money that comes out of the public purse. So that's the difference, Councillor Eddy. If it's Section 106, it is at the developer's cost. Anything more than Section 106, and it could be up to 100%, but it will be out of the public purse using grant.
Other questions? Fee. Oakball.
Thank you, Chair. And oh, blimey, that's loud. Jim, what is the... I know we can't guarantee through the planning process the affordable housing, but the track record of these kind of arrangements, are they fairly often complied with? Do we normally end up with the amount of affordable housing that is assured at this stage?
Yes, is the answer to that. I think obviously, if it's in a Section 106, then we know we get it. I mean, in this instance, as Suzanne has rightly said, we cannot guarantee through the planning system that Vistry will provide 50% affordable housing. I have no reason to consider that they won't, simply based on the fact that in these sort of cases before, I think they've identified that they've done a deal with Abbury Housing Association, who are a long-established housing association acting in the city. So we've got no reason to think that they won't. But you are doing it at risk, Councillor Goggin, ultimately. It's not something that I would say to you should be a hugely major material planning consideration because it's not secured through our planning policies. And there is always the possibility that the housing association will change their mind, change the look at the things they want to fund. But in my experience, where a developer has done what Vistry are proposing to do with a housing association, that has borne fruition and that level of affordable has been delivered.
Fee.
Oh, no. Oh, it's working. Questions? I think this is not working very well, is it? One for Susanna. There was some issues around flooding, and the initial comment from the officers was they opposed this, and then later on in the report it said it was fine. I must have missed something. Maybe I didn't read it very carefully. But what changed in the interim? And a second quick one for Matthew, I think, about peak traffic flows. There was something like 21, 24 additional vehicle journeys at peak time, which sounds quite low for a development of 106 units. Maybe it's me. If you could clarify, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll answer the drainage issue. I think it's the flood team in the council that had commented initially, and it was to do with the drainage strategy that had been submitted, that it wasn't clear where the outfall of the surface water drainage would be going to. But the later report that was submitted confirmed that there'd be a new sewer requisitioned by the applicant, and cut a long story short, the flood team are now happy with that, but they've requested another condition just to require the details of how the surface water drainage would be connected to this new sewer, and confirmation of the water board to check that they're okay with it as well. So the condition would require those details for approval.
Steve.
Thank you, Chair. You're right, Paul. That is loud.
Steve, could you just wait a moment, Matthew?
Yes, on the traffic flows, the the transport assessment thought there would be 21 AM peak and 26 PM peak vehicular trips. That was on the original application. So given that the number of beds has come down, it would be less than that. And the reason it's sort of lower is because there's not much car parking. So the numbers of people travelling will be much higher. So it was 11 cyclists, 223 walking, 83 bus and 23 rail that throughout the day. So people are going to use many modes, essentially.
Thanks, Matthew. Steve?
Thank you, Chair. I'll home in very gently on the microphone this time. I'd like some clarity on the number of cycle spaces. It says 222 in the report and it says 222 in the written submission 3 for public forum, but in the spoken address it was 208. So
yeah, there's been a couple of different figures in the report and on the amendment sheet, I think. When I counted them today, it was as is set out on the amendment sheet, which I think says 180. I know Charlotte's statement said 208, but the 180, which I think the amendment sheet says, is compliant with policy anyway. And that, as I showed, the basement plan showed where they were located. I don't know whether Charlotte wants to confirm the final figure. So yeah, the additional external cycle parking that's at the front of the site and down the side takes the figure up to 208 overall.
Excellent, thank you for the clarity. You've partially shot my fox. My next question was going to be, is this development policy compliant, which is normally my first question.
Yes, it is.
Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly about active travel. Obviously, this development is making play of the fact that it's located in a sustainable location. It's a short cycle ride, a short walk from the city centre, from Temple Meads. Obviously, it's referring to the Riverside cycle path between the site and also Temple Meads. But actually, that cycle path is extremely below standard as far as I'm concerned. There are lots of uneven ground, lots of blind bends, it's very narrow, and actually it's almost entirely unlit. And this time of year, people don't use it. I've had lots of residents say to me that they don't feel safe using that route. And obviously, this development is saying we've got a fantastic route into the city centre, but actually it isn't just the Section 106 money, what's happening here? Section 106 money could be devoted towards improving active travel infrastructure in the area. Did everyone hear that? The microphone was very funny.
I could answer partially. I guess Matthew could answer as well in terms of the route on the other side along Spark Evans Park. We consider sustainable development to be based on how far away it is from the city centre. And we haven't negotiated a contribution in this application towards the upgrade of that cycle path, but there are still contributions that could go towards upgrading the infrastructure in the area, and I don't know whether Matthew knows of any specific plans to upgrade that path at all, or who's maintaining it.
I mean, you're absolutely right, Councillor, that although it's a good path in daytime, there's a lot of work that needs doing to it, and we do know that there are lots of potential sources of funding. It links in with the flood strategy and the whole of sort of St Philip, so it's a much bigger problem than this development could solve on its own, but yes, we're very aware of the issues.
Tom?
Thank you. Yeah, my question was about sustainability. You mentioned that there's a heat network connection available in this development. Will it be hooked up to the heat network straight away, or will it require fossil fuel heating in the interim, and we've got a need to build net zero developments. How does this one stack up with that?
Yeah, the energy team confirms that it depends on the timing of when the development's brought forward, but I don't think there would be a day one connection possible, but the heat network's definitely going to this area, so they've required it to be future-proofed to connect when it is available. And the sustainability team have confirmed that the interim boilers would be acceptable, and then it would be required to connect to it when it is available. And the heating system proposed in the development would be compliant, would be compatible with the requirements for the heat network anyway, and it's been designed to connect eventually when it's ready in the area. And also it complies with all the other sustainability policies. We've got conditions on the recommendation that require details of the PV panels that would be delivering the 20% reduction in carbon emissions, and there's a requirement for a BREEAM excellent as well. So overall, it's considered it's a good sustainability response.
Ed?
I got quite confused in this about the different densities, and it seemed that we were using one boundary for density, talking about the relative lack of commercial density in this particular thing, but we were using a much wider boundary. When it came to residential density, we were just using this scheme and its own merits. And I was just wondering, could you just explain a little bit more about how the kind of spatial framework for the enterprise zone or this particular area, how you've assessed the different densities?
It's only one density figure. There's two figures mentioned in the report, I think, because the density has been brought down during the course of the application. I can't remember the exact figure now off the top of my head. I think it's about 213 dwellings per hectare. And that's in line with other developments in the area. The commercial floor space, the site allocation does require a mixed-use development. But it's explained in the report about the amount of commercial floor space that's proposed and why that's considered to be acceptable. The calculation is based on the urban living calculation. So it does take into account the commercial floor space. So that figure that's in the report of the 213 has factored in the fact that there's a 309 square metres commercial unit as well.
Okay. We've then got this lack of clarity about affordable housing, and it seems like some of the viability things have come in very, very late, and we don't have clarity about really whether or not we're happy about the viability assessment. So it seems like there's two options, really. Well, three options. One to accept it, one to defer, or one to have a kind of rolling viability assessment. Is there any sort of benefit, relative benefits between those three different options?
Well, the rolling viability assessment within 18 months, it would be a requirement anyway. Okay. Jim, I don't know whether you want to come in on that one as well.
Right. What the recommendation really is for you members is if you wanted to determine the application this evening with the applicant's offer of 15% affordable housing secured through a Section 106, our recommendation is that we have potentially two viability reviews. The first one is an encouraging one to get the developer to get on with it, which, as you've heard, they intend to, and that would only kick in if they haven't made a start within 18 months. So if you get on with it within 18 months, no need for that viability review. And the second one would be a viability review that would take place before any of the residential units are occupied, because by that point, the developer will know their costs, not their projected costs, but their real costs, because they'll have had a contractor out on site doing it. They'll have orders and invoices and receipts and contracts and so on and so forth. So all those issues about build costs that we're not totally clear about could be dealt with at that stage. The one downside of late stage reviews like that is that a late stage review will not get you more affordable housing on site, because it's too late in effect by then, because the housing association's taken the units, the other open market units are being marketed. What it would get you, if it showed that more could be provided, would be an off-site financial contribution that the council could apply to affordable housing elsewhere.
Can we condition that that will happen if the viability assessment, is that what you're recommending, that if the viability assessment shows that they could actually afford a higher than 15%, that we will then make that a condition?
Oh, goodness me, yes, council plan. Yeah, there would be no point of doing it if we didn't get anything out of it. So yes, a viability review. They're upwards only. Viability reviews are in accordance with planning practice guidance. So if the viability review showed that further levels of affordable housing could be provided at that stage, that would be through a financial contribution. The upfront one, if they didn't start within 18 months, and they were required to do the upfront viability review, and that showed that more affordable housing could be provided, then we'd expect that to be on site, because obviously they haven't started, and there's no reason why those additional units couldn't be provided on site at that stage.
Jim, thank you for that clarity. Just one more question. We've already heard from Councillor Varney that we would like, well, ideally we'd like people using cycle lane, even if it's not of great quality. At the moment, it appears there's quite hard boundaries between this and the neighbouring paintwork site. And I'm very concerned that we should see the highest levels of permeability across this whole kind of residential/commercial area. Is there anything we can do to try and make this permeability baked into the designs rather than what looks like rather hard lines and maybe a lack of permeability? For people then would all be forced out onto the Bath Road rather than to the neighbouring private developments.
Yeah, that has been the topic of discussions during the course of the application. It's difficult with the land ownership issues that I mentioned at the start. There is a route down through where the vehicular access off Bath Road is, just along the right edge of this drawing. It's shown indicatively as being able to be to walk through there, but obviously it's outside of the applicant's red line, that route anyway, so that would be something for future negotiations.
And could we do that through planning if there's I think there's a planning consent being sought, so we could do that through future planning consents, potentially?
Well, if a development proposal was put forward, we would have to consider it. Yeah, but as for this particular site, this is the scheme that's before us, so that's the layout that's being proposed currently. Obviously, if things change, the applicant might want to change the scheme one day to incorporate that if it's possible. But before us today is this current layout.
Thanks.
Shall we move on now to the debate, please? It seems to me that this is precisely the sort of derelict brownfield site which should actually help us to address Bristol's housing crisis. It's been derelict, I understand, for a long, long time. Further delay, assuming we have an acceptable scheme, seems imperative to me. Almost 50 or over 50% of 109 homes affordable housing is a remarkably high figure, however it's calculated, of course. And I'm conscious it's taken some time, just over 2 years, for this scheme to arrive here. In the meantime, it seems to me the applicant has changed the scheme. For example, the height of the building's been reduced. There's lower density. They've met our concerns with transport about putting in the bus lay-by, so pedestrian and vehicular safety should be addressed there. So it certainly seems an excellent scheme to me. The issue of the affordable housing figure, of course, and the arrangements, by going ahead, in my view, with this application, but having a condition to allow for a rolling viability review, looks a sensible way. This is actually organisations which is working closely with Gorham Homes, our own housing company, and actually is already submitted 4 schemes acceptable, well, 3 of them acceptable. It depends, the 4th this evening on your will. So far this year, so their credibility is very much tied up with delivering this. And if we actually found they didn't, that's going to stick in the gullet on future applications. So on that basis, I don't have any hesitation and will be voting for this bid. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. And as you know, we don't agree on an awful lot politically, but on the planning, I think we do agree with an awful lot, and I agree entirely with what you said. I'll be brief. The upcoming connection to the heat network, it's a brownfield site. The bus lay-by will actually improve the existing traffic on Bath Road, let alone be good, sustainable transport for people to get to work, 50% affordable housing. The record of this Vistry with Blackberry Hill, City Gateway, Romney House, I have no doubt that they will come up with the affordable housing. Food planting, the plans have been amended in density and height. Public space, which will at the front of the building, and play space for children. So, yeah, I'll be voting for it.
I think colleagues. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I also will be voting in favour of this application. Can I urge you to test the will of the committee as early as
well,
is decent?
Certainly on the... I'm sorry. I think we ought to allow certainly a proper debate, so Councillor Plowden, Scott Meyer, so let's hear from him first.
I would just urge that the developers here and neighbouring on the paintworks would try and resolve some of their differences, because it's quite dispiriting to see the potential lack of permeability, which would, I think, be very strongly in the interests of the future residents of both the paintworks and this development, to try and make sure that they have plenty of options to move around and enjoy the particularly the excellent urban design in paintworks.
I don't doubt that any of us don't agree with your sentiments, but we're asked to actually consider the application we have here this evening. So obviously I trust they actually have a far more harmonious relationship in future. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank the officer for her report this evening, also members of the public for coming in and taking the time to speak to us today, and of course comments from members of this committee. My ward colleague, Councillor Joss Clark, actually called in this application back in March 21, and at the time she was citing concerns over overdevelopment, lack of amenity space, and also building heights. But since that time, I believe that the development has changed quite considerably. Obviously, the number of units has decreased to 109, amenity space has been provided, and also building heights have been reduced. So I believe that Councillor Joss Clark is placated. I am also placated, so I will be supporting this application this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. As ever, Councillor Pearce's wishes are my command, so with that, can I formally move approval of this, subject to the committee's conditions? Can I have a seconder, please? That's Paul. Right. If we do a name vote, Andrew.
So what's the terminology again? I've forgotten. Yes, I agree. I support.
Yes. John.
4.
Tom.
4.
Ed.
4.
V.
4.
Steve.
4.
Philippa. 4. And Paul.
4.
And I will vote for. So that's unanimous. So that's a pass with the conditions attached, of course. With that, can I thank you all for your attendance this evening, and mention our next meeting is on the 15th of December, and formally close the meeting. Thank you.